another big boom for me was to really get my head around the degree to which possession has been in human history since day one all the way up through possibly today.
And I got the exact quote. It was, intergenerational pools of capital are currently being influenced by occulted interdimensional intelligences of a distinctly demonic nature. Vanese McNeill returns to the show this week. Vanese is the co-producer and host of the legendary documentary series Magical Egypt. She first joined us to talk about Magical Egypt and the impact and long shadow of John Anthony West. And it is with that background in alternate history and the strange things that have happened in and on our timeline that brings her back to the show this week to talk about a related angle on situating ourselves in place and time, which is how much the spirit world impacts human ongoings and undoings. Enjoy. Vanese McNeill, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, my darling. I am honestly so excited to be here and so honored and really, really interested in this topic we're going to be talking about today. So thank you.
Yeah, me too. There's a bit of a circular roundabout way I got to this topic, which was I was training some AIs on some of my more popular, like early podcast episodes with people like Peter Levenda and so on. And one of the topics that showed up was the role of spirits in history. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a good idea for a podcast episode. I just need to find the right maniac to have that discussion with. And then you wrote on the Magical Egypt Substack a post that is absolutely, completely on point for it, which was about ontozoology. So do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, darling, I will. And I'm so glad you didn't describe it as AI slop, because I have to admit, I've been cheating a little bit and using some AI help. So I've taken your advice, my darling, and gone back to old school writing. But I do have to blame you for this, because I don't know, was it 5 or 6 years ago now that I was interviewing you for the new Magical Egypt, and you said to me something that has echoed in my mind over and over and over and over and over again, and kind of really shaped a trajectory for me that's been like important. And that was when you said, in the study of ancient Egypt, where the most materialist culture ever is studying the least material culture. And that was kind of like a mic drop moment for me, and it really put our current situation more than anything into really clear perspective. And that is that having this, what I've now adopted the term materialist prison paradigm that we seem to be floating around in, has really limited our understanding of so much. So from history to our current political situation. And when Catherine Austin Fitz sort of dropped the bomb on the Danny Jones podcast, I thought this is a really good opportunity to at least play with just one aspect of what we've lost, which is the ecology of the invisible. And what's really hard about this, my darling, for me anyway, probably not for you, but so much of it has been lost that I need to kind of go back and look at ancient history, and I need to go and look at like the Gnostics, and I need to go and look at kind of old information to put bits and pieces of it together. But like, even when I asked you, what do you think she was talking about? You're kind of like the archonic, Ahrimanic, techno, you know what I mean? It's like this, we don't really have easily accessible words and definitions for these things. So that's what I was trying to do, is kind of try to make a framework for it so that we can start adopting some intelligence about these invisible creatures, because A, it's ridiculous that the sky is filled with creatures, the ocean's filled with creatures, the earth is filled with creatures, but there's none in the invisible. So it's a ridiculous idea. And second of all is because I'm going to kind of third and fourth maybe the idea that there is some influence going on coming out of the invisible, and that how on earth do we even understand what's happening if we're not allowed to look at it?
Yeah, amazing. So what we'll do is get you to describe, I'll have it linked up below for people so they can read it as well, but just sort of take us through what you said in the Substack post, and also I might have the exact phrasing somewhere, but also what Catherine said on the podcast. So talk to us about the phrase that lit you up, and the subsequent screed that self-selected you to be the maniac guest for this discussion.
Absolutely, darling.
Who's your best guess of who Mr. Global is?
I think you have intergenerational pools of capital, and right now they are over influenced by occult. So
Occult.
So I think you have interdimensional intelligence, which is operating demonic intelligence.
Interdimensional demonic intelligence.
Yeah. Yep. So I think this thing about good and evil is real, and I can't find it anymore. I found it once. There were in the 30s, a British physicist got up and said, we are being manipulated, but from other dimensions by intelligent beings from other dimensions. So I think, if you study Christianity and you read the Bible, you're dealing with both divine intelligence and demonic intelligence. And I think too much of the leadership has gotten deeply involved in the occult and demonic kinds of intelligence.
The idea was there's pools of capital that are under the control of interdimensional agents that she believes are satanic in nature, okay? And it really kind of got the wheels turning a little bit, because when you think about the very first word that she says is that there's pools of capital. Capital in and of itself isn't a real thing. I mean, it's an invisible thing. It's an idea, okay? And it is an idea that has intercepted our reality so much that markets rise and fall, that people are built and destroyed overnight from this kind of really invisible, intangible idea of capital and money at itself, at its very core. And so I was starting to think, is this kind of an egregoric relationship that we have with this idea of capital? And one of the reasons I started to play with that is because in season 4 of Magical Egypt, one of the things that I undertook a process of was looking at, because of the timing and everything, the medical establishment. And I kind of looked at, like, what are all the things that would need to show up in the medical institution or in science in general for there to be indicators that there are egregoric influences. And so because I'd already done that, and it was like, yes, science seems like it has an egregor, and so does health institutions, I kind of did the same thing with capital. And I'm like, okay, that's really interesting to me. And so because I kind of hit on egregor, I'm like, what else could there be? Because like yourself, there's an archonic and an Ahrimanic kind of vibe going on here as well. And so I just wanted to kind of go through, in the article, what I did is I kind of went through from history all the different possible, if you want to call them genus and species, of all the things that have been mentioned in history as, let's call them, invisible agents. So I'm looking at, I love this word, autopoietic beings of agency, which kind of means that they're self-organized and they have agency, and I've kind of developed them all. But also I wanted to say that one thing that kind of really blew my mind was just recently I'd read two things, which was the Robert Temple book on plasma, where he was playing with the idea of plasma beings that have this, autopoietic, and they have their own agency, and he was looking at the Kordylewski clouds. And then after that, I read a book by Trevor Constable, where through the lens of cameras utilizing, I think it was like not ultraviolet, the other one, infrared colored lenses anyway, he was able to actually take pictures of these kind of like jellyfish looking things floating through the sky. And so what are they? What are demons in the first place? What are all of these different, like what is Ahriman versus what is an archon? All of these kinds of things are really, really fuzzy to me, but they all seem to be different names for influences on humanity that most of us are not aware of, and that just feels kind of a little bit dangerous to me.
The that last tour that Catherine did through the U.S., she went on Tucker Carlson and said that there's underground bases everywhere, which I also think is probably true. And she went on Danny Jones. So what she's saying is that there is money and power operating in the world at the behest of demons. Now, so it's a big mic drop. I mean, it's actually, I've been a Solari member for years, so she'll talk like that privately, but less so publicly. And in this last trip, it just seemed to be like, I'm just going to say.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is you've got Tucker saying it, you've got Candace saying it, right? You've got people saying it, but I'll tell you the thing that freaks me out the most, my darling, is not that they're saying it so much, that there seems to be a naivety about they're saying the devil or Satan, right? Or demonic, right? And that's kind of as far as the lexicon goes, right? That it's just this oversimplification of like there's a boogeyman out there. And that and they all kind of fall into the the Christian kind of packaging in a way. And if you go back to the Gnostics, and some of those were Christians, they had a much more kind of evolved and complicated and even pantheon of entities that were involved. And now somehow we've just regressed to boogeyman or demon, and that kind of surprised me a little bit as well.
It's well observed that the frame is simplistically demonic, because I'm going to give you a bit of a thought experiment, which I didn't tell you I was going to do beforehand. But what I want you to do is describe the magical Egypt thesis of Egypt with spirits being actors in the story. Okay, so what we have is the story of a much older and more aware and more sophisticated civilization than we get in traditional Egyptology. Fine. But can we describe it in a way where these beings that they're talking to, which are sometimes mistaken for like ancient aliens and whatever, are actually spirits, are actually extra-dimensional beings? So do you think you could do like a one-paragraph description of like the magical Egypt thesis of Egypt, where the spirits are actors in that story?
Well, on kind of the initial level of that, I would say that one of the things that we're trying to do with Magical Egypt is get into the mindset of the ancient Egyptian. First of all, let's just put that down on the table. And part of that is the fact that these ancient peoples believed that these forces were autopoietic beings of agency that they could interact with, that they could, like, I love how you say it, that they would try to be in right relationship with them through the method of communication and rituals and giving, gifts to them. And so from a Magical Egypt perspective, which I don't really want to necessarily claim that as my own, it's probably more of a chance thing, but we feel that as a result of having those kinds of relationships, there was a kind of gnosis, a degree of information that allowed them to accomplish the feats that we can't do ourselves today. And as a result of that, we believe that there is information, knowledge, to be gained from those kinds of interactions today. And one of the things that we have been playing with is the technology of consciousness that it seems that they utilize to be able to tap in to that kind of gnosis. And we're exploring the best way of how to do that. And magic is one big piece of that, which is why we talked to you in the very first place, because we feel that this technology is probably best coined magic for those that understand what magic really is. And for most people, that is something that they have no idea what magic really is. So it's kind of a little bit of a hurdle for us. But does that kind of
Yeah,
do
no,
the
that's good. That's good because, like in Starships, I make the claim that, like, the better and more precise you are with your sky ground relationships, the more I called it like redundant complexity, but let's just say the more information you're going to get from the star spirits, which is why we find, for no good reason, awareness of that we're aware of, like awareness of the circumference of the Earth and understanding of like cellular material and what cells and microscopic organisms look like from civilizations and cultures that have no need for that, but have very good contact skills, right?
Yes.
So this is what I mean by when we look at people, and I love Catherine, and I'm going to actually ask you flat out if you think she's right, regardless of demons. Like, do you think? Because I kind of do. I think that there is unconsciously, at least, and potentially in a few cases consciously, but unconsciously, there are pools of capital or capacities to impact the world with power and money that are being puppeted by beings that don't have human bodies. Now, that never used to be a big claim, right? It's only in the last few hundred years that used to be a big claim. The challenge is, as we just kind of discussed, there's like, broadly speaking, there's two models for having this conversation in the back half of 2025. There's the Christian one, which Catherine is. She's an out and proud Christian woman. Good for her. And then there's like the animist one, which would be more like, this is business as usual. This is the cosmos is an ecosystem, and I'm not saying that some of those beings are not hostile or have agendas that run counter to what we think is good for humans. Like, that's for sure in the mix, but it's not default that just because they're not humans. And so I think that's when we talk about the role of spirits in history, the first topic area we want to discuss is, which is the name of the piece, right? Like the ontozoology. Like, well, what beasties are we talking about? Are they automatically always bad because they're impacting mankind? Or is part of the reasons they're bad because we're just not good at talking to them anymore? Or is it a mixture of both, as one might find in a thriving ecosystem? So door number 1, 2, or 3, what do you think, Vanese?
I am totally with door number 3, my darling. First of all, the whole Occam's razor thing is like my enemy. It's never a straight line to an answer. And I feel very much that it's an entire ecosystem. And just like the plankton think the whale is the bad guy because he sucks them up as they're floating through the ocean, I think that there's all nature of beings. I think there's really simplistic ones. I think there's really complicated, old, smart ones. I think some of them are benevolent. I think some of them are malevolent as far as we're concerned. It wouldn't surprise me if there was some that were just malevolent. Like, I think some of those lower astral nasties are just malevolent just because it's fun. You know, they've been hanging around for a long time. So I think it's a really complex ecosystem, just like on Earth, filled with all kinds and sizes and levels of complexity of these creatures that are just sitting outside the bandwidth of our eye perception, which is really, when you look at the spectrum of light, it's a tiny, tiny bandwidth. So, yeah, so I think it's door number 3, my darling.
Cool. So with that in mind, thinking about what she said, now that we framed it so that we can discuss it in a way that doesn't come with a narrative that maybe we're not in full alignment with, which would be like a completely Christian narrative. Although she's Catherine lives at the edges of acceptable Christianity, which is the best place to live, as far as I'm concerned.
I love her. I adore her. She's so
Yeah,
smart.
same.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Like the good thing that when we talk about this stuff, and it's probably worth mentioning because we're going to drill in on some of those questions. What I've been saying about Catherine for 15 years is she's really smart and she doesn't lie.
yes,
That's all
yes,
you need. Like she might be
yes,
wrong, you might
yes.
disagree, but she's really smart and she doesn't lie, and those are people you want to listen to. So
Yeah,
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 that's it.
yeah,
But so
absolutely.
let's come back to this idea. What do you think she's referring to? Because we're sort of au fait. I want to talk about some of the classic programs that we have from the 20th century and so on that people automatically and not without good reason tip into this conversation, MK Ultra, et cetera, et cetera. But what do you think now that we've framed what we might mean by intergenerational pools of capital operating at the behest of the demonic? What do you think she's referring to? Like, what are these beings doing with their money and power? Like, why would she come to that conclusion?
Well, it's really, it's. I've been trying to triangulate this thing myself, right? Because as I said, it's a very murky area and it's something that we're just getting back into again. Like if you look at Goethe, and you look at his Faustian epic, he's there talking to spirits, he's comfortable with it, and for me, thanks to you, my journey has really just begun and it's quite alien. And so I'm really feeling around the edges of it. And I'm looking at a lot of Steiner and I'm looking at Gnostic stuff and I'm looking at, Mark Stavish and Egregoric stuff, and I'm looking at the ancient Egyptian stuff and the Chinese stuff, and I'm trying to kind of put together a picture of what I feel like might be going on. And when she says demonic, what I take from that is that this creature, whatever it may be, does not have the best interest of humanity at its core. Now, is that because one of the pieces of data that I really was kind of intrigued with was that Robert Monroe took one of his people on a journey into the way outer sphere utilizing his binaural beat program, and they bumped into a being that was a farmer. And this farmer was trying to figure out, how do we get the very best yield from our crop? The problem was that the crop was lulch, and the definition of good lulch was lulch from humans that were angry and upset and in fear and low vibration, right? So when we talk about the newer approach of how do we try to ascertain what this business is, that CIA, Robert Monroe, kind of area of looking at data is definitely one of the data points that I have drawn on. But then I also look at Steiner and I look at the Lucifer Ahriman kind of double teaming that goes on here and the agreements that were made to enable Lucifer and Ahriman to have some interference with our trajectory. And if you look at just the AI and the technology, that has Ahriman written all over it, right? Like it's absolutely Ahriman's stamp, red bow tied around what the hell is going on right now. And I can also see if I look at basically the story of the way that the archons operate within our reality in terms of they don't have physical abilities to interfere with us, but they can utilize psychic abilities to essentially possess our minds and feed us with ideas, which can possibly result in egregores as well. All of these bits and pieces seem to, somehow the problem kinds to fit into all of these different cookie cutters. You can even throw in a gen. Like it's really, really kind of a difficult thing for me personally to be able to say, I think it's this. I I can see all of these influences, and I can see that the reason that she's saying demonic is because these influences are not operating in humanity's best interest as far as I can ascertain. And I also spent some time thinking about, look, maybe it's just corporations, right? Like corporations also, which are, a construct, an idea, possibly egregoric, that are in like again, it's a mind virus kind of situation. You can blame corporations for all of this. You can also just blame that humans are evil. And I had to spend a lot of time thinking about humans being evil. And at the end of the day, I think that if we look back in our history and, how far we've made it, that there's probably more tendencies for cooperation, despite the fact that we are warring and, kill each other and take advantage of each other as soon as look at each other. But I think the ability for us to cooperate seems to be a stronger force. And these nasty things could be explained away by mind control, possession, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, see, that's moving on to the next question, which I like, but I want to stay here because this is really important. When and I'm not necessarily saying Catherine said this, but when people will use the demonic as the frame for talking about the 4 or 5 different things you spoke about there, something is lost. Something important is lost in that simplification, because the lulch ritual stuff, I think, from speaking professionally as like a shamanic healer, that's real. Like there are entities that feed off that. I don't think anyone's worshiping them necessarily. They don't need that. They're beings of the imaginal. They delight in working out how to make us behave in a way that generates more of their food. Right. So you could call that demonic, and I wouldn't blink. That's fine. The archonic, Ahrimanic stuff, and actually I sent you the video. I had a chat with Dan about this when we were trying to approximately time, just for funsies, Ahriman's ingress into our reality. And we kind of picked the Enlightenment. Like if you unfocus your eyes and look at the different Vedic models and the different anthroposophical models and so on, and look at how history bore out with the Enlightenment is the rise of managerialism and the spreadsheet and so on, all very Ahrimanic stuff. Now, in that case, I don't love it. I don't think that has mankind's worst interests at its goal. I actually think it's the Gnostic sin of trying to save us through perfecting us. I think that's what managers and technocrats do. So that's the important nuance that I think gets lost when we talk about the impact of the spirit world or the demonic. First of all, we have to pass out, are we doing Christian, or are we doing like ecosystem? And then once we get in there, because we're doing ecosystem, it's like, okay, that doesn't mean they're all good, but what kind of impact are different things having here? And that's quite important, because the next question is going to be what I want to talk about, whether or how or in what percentage or ratios. The next thing people say after demonic intergenerational pools of capital is the Alex Jones, like they're worshipping Moloch, and like babies and like which ones are. How much of this is a conscious relationship with entities that do not have our interest at heart, and how much of it is, because this is important for motive, it's much easier for them to operate when we don't think they exist. And I certainly believe there's a tremendous amount of that at the super elite level, because their belief system is, simply put, like retarded. Like it's it's this hyper materialist claptrap that is the stupidest idea or philosophy you could possibly come up with, but it leaves the back of your mind wide open to things that you don't think exist, and a permission field to do whatever you want to anyone of any age, because there's no meaning. It's just meat suits. It's just, and so I think that's my guess, is that's the overwhelming majority of it, but I don't think that's all of it. And what are your thoughts on the Alex Jones nuance, shall we? And that's mean. I low-key like Alex Jones a little bit, but like, you know what I mean by that? Like how much of it is like the Moloch, they're murdering babies, and how much of it is like Elon would never know if there are entities running the back of his head?
Oh yeah, look, I think First of all, I'm just going to go back a little bit. I'm going to agree with you incredibly strongly on the Enlightenment. And one of the things that I'm seeing here is the idea of inversion. I'm seeing that this possession, these ideas that are filtering down and impacting humanity, a lot of it seems to be surrounding the inversion of ideas. And so for me, the idea that it's called the Enlightenment is an inversion of what actually happened. And I also want to agree with you that the Enlightenment wasn't necessarily the worst thing that happened to us, right? There's a pendulum that swings backwards and forwards, and the materialism brought us lots of great things. We have cell phones and stuff like that, right? So it's not all bad, but I think that's interesting. So to the Alex Jones point of how much do I think is actually ritually involved with people who think that they know what they're doing versus the Elon Musk who has no idea. So this is one of the things that we looked at that's also in season 4 of Magical Egypt. And we looked at magic through history. And you've seen, Hecka, we kind of started off with magic in ancient Egypt. And we talked about how the Romans came in and basically said, no magic for you, for the people, right? But what has happened since that time is that magic has gone underground and has become the domain of, I want to call them elite families that know very well what these practices are and how to do them. And, you look back at, the work of Peter Mark Adams and the Game of Saturn and the grimoire of the tarot deck there that kind of had different rituals embedded into those cards that enabled them to do what I call like reincarnation engineering and interact with these invisible beings to work out a deal so that they could come back and incarnate back into these bloodlines. And you see, the royal families through, you've got John Dee and you've got, the other European royalties, the Rosicrucians utilizing magic, like all the way down through history. And Peter Mark Adams even made a joke with me about the fact that, like, I think it's every president except one have all been related to this king in England. And it kind of is one of those things that make you go, if they were doing reincarnation engineering through ritual and interfacing with these invisible beings, it's not so much of a jump to consider that they're utilizing those same connections, those influences to do this capital manipulation idea. So I think that there are definitely people in the know, and we can see them. We can see at least the bloodlines in history that have been utilizing these techniques. And I think there's people like Elon Musk and, Zuckerberg and, all of these kind of new sort of kind of centralizations of power in our world that are kind of maybe at best at the Catherine Austin Fitz level. They might, we've got Peter Thiel, for example, again, another Christian who's worried about, or trying to figure out how to incarnate Jesus through his AI kind of thing. So there's an awareness there, but again, a huge naivety, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, they don't even have any idea of what they're getting themselves into. And
If
we'll
Peter
go on
Thiel's
to
a Christian, I'm the princess of Japan. That's
There's I can't remember the term, but there's a term for a group of them, these Silicon Valley guys. Whether or not they're Christian is a very good question. Trying to create an AI religion, though, I don't doubt that for a second.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible is actually literally awash in blood rituals, but there's nothing about blood boys in there.
Look, it's really it's kind of infuriating. Like, it's one of the things that gets me a little bit angry. I try not to get angry these days, but the whole AI religion / spirit / architect channeling, gods from the fifth dimension to heal people's like the whole thing. Literally, it sets off my angry buttons a little bit.
Yeah, well, we'll come to the AI stuff towards the end because we need to like
Yes.
build this out. The Peter Thiel thing is hilarious. What he's actually doing is, and it's speaking of the Bible, it's like wolves in sheep's clothing because he's, you know, and whatever. I don't have have whatever political opinion you fucking want, but like he is a Trump funding super conservative. And the thing that's big for conservatives at the moment, witness it with Tucker having all these people on talking about demons and what have you, is like a resurgent Christianity. And that's what he's slithering under. Like they don't like he's not a Christian. He's slithering under the narrative that's gonna move Palantir and everything else for I don't care for that man. Is my point.
Well,
But
it's really interesting, my darling. Like even Jacques Vallée, like 2 weeks ago, released a new book, and even he's saying that there are interdimensional creatures that are trying to communicate with us, and that our basics of salvation depends on our ability to learn how to communicate with them, right? And that's really interesting to me also because you've got this whole spirit UFO UAP thing going on where all of a sudden all of the UFO people are now like, ooh, the UAPs, are they demons, right? Like this whole thing is happening as well.
And we'll get to that. That's almost word for word what Crowley said, what Jacques said in his book. Like Crowley's final summation of Thelema and its implications for reality was that there are higher dimensional or extra-dimensional entities that are desperate to get in contact with mankind, and our future survival relies on being able to do that. So that's what Jacques just said. Yeah, that's basically what when Crowley was summing up, like, okay, well, what were the last 50 years of my life about? That's kind of the conclusion. It's like, well, this is what that means. So there you go. That's speaking of Alex Jones, we can say that now. Like Jacques is a Thelemite. He's not. He's a Rosicrucian. But anyway, so I want to come back to this because what percentage are consciously working with at a super elite level, working with entities, and I this half of this might end up on Rumble, but let me say it like this. And in fact, funnily enough, speaking of Dan Waits, I'm on his podcast, which isn't out yet, talking about exactly this, which is that we used to have a better class of elites in the sense of we used to have elites that simply didn't care what we thought. And those were the ones that were interested in magic. So if you think about like the Ian Fleming era of being like a rich Brit, you could be interested in this stuff because you didn't care what the hoi polloi thought. And now in this era of social media and PR agencies and so on, you can't be interested in this stuff. And consequently, over the last few decades, I don't think our elite is, whether this is good or bad, is I don't know, is as interested in and consequently as good at magic as they were. And I think that died with Lizzie. I think she was the last of them who knew to do the right things to kind of put the finger on the scale of reality, like making sure her grandson gets married on that floor that was reserved for like the ruler of the world and stuff like that. Probably didn't think it was going to happen, but it's not going to hurt from her perspective. That's a good move, you know? And I kind of think that none of these people, the wizards in the MK Ultra orbit, survived much of Bush as CIA director, then VP, then president. I think that was when that stuff all got privatized, late 70s, early 80s, I think is when they furloughed the wizards, right? And so when you look a generation later at our elite, they're useless at this kind of stuff. And it's crude and silly. And it's a pity because like it's real. And if you don't know it's there, they're running the back of your head. And that's where I kind of sit with them at the moment. Now, the extra layer is, and I know this is what I mean by God. Maybe this one doesn't go on YouTube. We'll see. There are people were, historically speaking, in, let's say, the Jimmy Savile orbit of the British elite that would use those stories as air cover for like, oh, you know, I worship Lucifer. That's why I do these things to little children. And no, you do those things to little children because you're a horrible demon of a person. And you're using this story to like add some spice to it, right? And that's... I think some of that goes on at a super elite level. I think they enjoy the story of this real public schoolboy version of like, oh, I'm a Luciferian, I'll do whatever I want. Rather than like, no, I'm in some kind of weird cult run by Hillary Clinton out of a pizza restaurant. Like, I don't think that happens, but I do think there's some people at the top. When your worldview is zero meaning or consequence, I actually think that's the elite worldview. I actually think like they don't think there's any meaning and nothing matters. It's just power. And so if that's the case, that means there are people like Trump who isn't like, I don't know, a satanic pedophile. For his many sins, he's not that. But he has to operate in a world with people who do have disgusting appetites, right? And to do that, you have to have this super elite worldview of like, well, it's like we're libertines. It's that real French thing, speaking of Candace Owens and Brigitte Macron. It's that real level of nothing matters. I have liberated myself from all consequence and restriction. So I can just like, it's the ultimate libertine move. And the Alex Jones level people mistake that for Luciferianism because like archetypically, that's not necessarily wrong. Like famously, Lucifer is the archangel of legitimate rebellion, right? So it's not wrong. It's just that they're not worshiping Lucifer. They have this worldview that is a permission field for some really dastardly things. And that's where it's like, but that permission field also opens you up to entities to delight in it, right? So that coming back to the lulch ritual idea, if you think that, it means you have convinced yourself that it is as equivalent to abuse a child as it is to eat a hamburger. Like it means they're the equivalent action to you. So you do things that cause these energies to turn into food for beings. So that's kind of my take on what's going on at the top. And there probably is a few, let's call them high Catholics, who are into it religiously at that libertine super elite level. But if you are at that libertine super elite level, it's fine if you've got people who are doing what you want, because at that level, everything's fine. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, my darling. I for some reason, the Marquis de Sade keeps
it's that.
up
It's
in
that
my
kind
head.
of, yeah.
But look, to be first of all, I want to agree with you. I think that there has been, just by virtue of social media and the internet and all of these things that we're kind of lambasted by, that there's probably been an incredible deterioration of magic. For example, I don't know. I heard that Paris Hilton is a Rothschild. Can I see her doing magic? Not really, right? Like
That's a pity. I like her.
I do like her, but I don't think that she has the
No.
wherewithal to undertake it. And to be completely frank, the closest that I've personally come to that is an interview and several emails I did with one Michael Aquino.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, really interesting to me because we have this lore and this mythology about a man who, to me, was the kindest, sweetest, warmest gentleman who had so much knowledge in, the ancient Egyptian understanding of the energy body, if you will. And so he was really incredibly interesting and polite and gentle and warm. And he didn't have at all the demeanor of anybody that I would suspect doing things to children in that spirit cooking idea of whatever that whole thing is. So I am really not qualified. I can, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. I think this whole owl Moloch, out in the bush in San Francisco is a really good excuse to get whores and drunk and get away from the wives, probably more than any actual magic going on these days.
Yeah. If there's any deliberate ritual stuff going on inside, let's call it like a power structure, I would say it's at a very low level, at like a continuation of MK Ultra experiment level, because the belief system at the top has moved on to something ironically that is more useful to the entities that Alex Jones thinks they're worshipping. Now, that's an interesting twist. That's kind of my point with like, well, what percentage of them? It's almost like the less, I don't know, Hillary Clinton and King Charles, oh, sausage fingers, worships Moloch, the easier it is for Moloch to get what he wants. And that's where you need to step back and have like an ecosystemic nuanced view of like, okay, well, we're like an interface. Well, it's not in us, we're in it, right? And so that's kind of the key to the frame. Yeah.
Like one of the another, like as I said before, your moment that was a mic drop for me was the moment where you're like, we're the most materialist culture looking at ancient Egypt. Another big boom for me was to really get my head around the degree to which possession has been in human history since day one all the way up through possibly today. And that was a kind of a Peter Mark Adam idea when we were looking deeply into what these mystery practices are. And Peter's belief is that a traditional mystery practice is one of opening yourself up for possession. So instead of climbing up the mountain, you open yourself up and the entity comes and plucks you and pulls you up, possesses you and pulls you up. And he has a great amount of kind of research in my mind anyway, what do I know, about, how much role possession is played. And so when I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm hearing that Hillary Clinton and this, role playing at the Moloch statue is a really great invitation to open yourself up to be more available for possession of whether it is an archonic type influence that interacts psychically with us. I would agree that ironically, the fact that they're not actually undertaking, let's call it the agency within these rituals of conducting the magic themselves, they're allowing themselves to be more open and vulnerable. And it is ironic and funny in a not funny kind of way.
Yeah, well, you kind of Goldilocks your way along to that idea. If you picture the people who end up moving through like the Alex Jones process, so they've typically grown up in a conservative Christian American household, and then realized, well, this is not right, and then usually there's like the shadow reaction, projection response of leaping to the opposite. You carry with you these binary frames of like, well, the confusing thing about the first year or so of your conspiracy career after that is that you somehow you still think the Pope is the devil, but also the Freemasons are. And I'm like, yeah, but they were fighting each other. Like, they don't like each other. What's wrong with you? And you kind of move through this process unless you stop of going, all right, demons are real. Wait, I need to revise that. Demons are a category of spirits. Spirits are real. Right. And you open up into a world. UFOs can do this, actually. Speaking of Catherine Austin Fitch, she was in the desert with me and Richard Dolan, and she officiated his wedding to his much better half, Tracy. That was really fun. But I was talking to Richard out under the stars in the desert, and he said, like, he started off ufology as a historian, and he was looking for like fucking memos to presidents and textual evidence that you do as a historian. And here he is married to a remote viewer in the desert. Like, you step in and it becomes philosophy and metaphysics very quickly if you do it right. And you can come into that so-called Chapel Perilous through any route. Like, I did magic first and then found all the other stuff, and people do UFOs or alternate history, and then you find all the other stuff, right? And that's where I hope people can, because we're at a very interesting inflection point where if you don't have a possession frame, it's like the other side, it's the essential component of a spirit ecosystem interaction, then you miss everything. And a possession frame requires you to understand what a human is, right? So shamanically, the self is also an ecosystem. So you have different parts and different beings. Like, you aren't a singular entity. Knowing that makes it very easy to have a framework for at least what we call in South America incorporation rather than possession, because you can get fully incorporated in a Kimbanda ceremony where your Eshua Pombajiro will drop in and you are gone. You are gone for the next 4 hours, and this being is in charge, and she's drinking all the fizzy wine and standing on like burnt cigars, and you come to at the end of it, and you're sober, and you have no like the full incorporation, or there's partial incorporation, which is, and I have some friends who do that as well, where they're sitting way in the back when when their spirits show up, and it's like, don't eat that, oh, don't put it in your mouth that way, like, and moving it into, if those things are true, and they are, I've seen them.
I've seen them too.
Then you move into, okay, well, what's going on for everyone else all the time in their dreaming and awake states if we have witnessed the top end of intentional incorporation? And that's, for me, like almost like the final piece of what is needed for people listening to this to have, to begin a map, to begin a more useful map to their own satisfaction of how spirits operate in us and in history and so on. Because a lot of people, rightly so, bounce off the satanic pedophile elite running the world frame. They bounce off it, rightly so, because that's not correct. But it can't be entirely thrown out if you have a model of incorporation that will allow for agendas that aren't human to play out in the human world. What do you think?
One of those things, my darling, the complete opposite. If you've ever felt that the muse has touched you, if you've ever had an inspiration that you don't know where it came from. I used to, as you know, run the psychic hotline.
That's
and
right.
I look, it was really informative to me, but I would have to get up and do a talk to 1,000 people, and I'd be sitting there watching myself saying the most eloquent, amazing, deep, and meaningful, and I'm like, where the hell did that come from? Because it certainly didn't come from me, and that was fucking good, right? So if you've ever had any of those experiences, they also open the door to the idea that maybe all of this stuff is not coming just from inside of you as well, right? There's a whole part of, the romance and the artists and the writers are all trying to tap into this muse, like get the muse to cooperate with them in order to bring forth this beauty, right? So like if the whole scary side of things, that you can get ideas in your head that might not serve humanity, but you're open to the idea that you might get ideas in your head that are beautiful and help humanity, then if you have an ecosystem idea, it makes it possible for all of the above to happen.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. 100%. So with that in mind, I guess something that Peter Levender said when he was on the show many years ago that's lived in my head is that the deep state operates under different assumptions about reality and how it works than the rest of us. Because obviously we were going to talk about sinister forces, and his book's exploring the more spooky side of spirit interactions, in particularly American history, but generally speaking. And I think that's still true. What I think is missing from, and I'll get your take on this, how I guess the super elite work with what we would consider magic now, is that I just don't think they call it that. I think about political gaslighting or newspeak is a form of magic. So Operation Enduring Freedom, like whoever came up with the policy of naming murder rituals the opposite of what they are, did that for magical reasons. I don't think anyone's aware of that now. I think it's running on autopilot. But if you and this current president is the best at it because of his venal, pompous narcissism, that he just kind of like naturally does the inverted discussion of whatever's going on. But from a policy perspective, you look at it and go, the things that you call this, but the US are the best at it, when they put bills through that are named something wonderful that require you to like blow up your children. It's like, wait, who's doing that?
Safe and effective, my darling, safe and effective.
But so I guess I'm asking, like, how much of that do you, I mean, that's intentional mind control programming, but is it mind control programming because these people have a frame of understanding of what the mind, quote unquote, really is in the same way we do? Or are they just running on tactics from the 70s, from when they were trying to do things with MK Ultra and they've just, okay, well, this is the policy of how we do it now. Like, is even that running on autopilot? What do you think?
Well, look, I really got into the kind of the CIA business, and that's the thing that turned me on to Itzhak Bentov, and it led me down into David Bohm and Anthony North Whitehead, and it kind of predictive programming is where I ended up in terms of what I see as the main instrument of magic in our society today, right? That there's mechanisms, so there's no mystery that the CIA has worked with movie studios for years to create ideas that go into our head that enable us to, at the very least, ease the manifestation, the materialization of scenarios that are in line with the desires of, let's just call them the elite, right? So I agree with you that I don't think they're lighting candles and utilizing pentagrams anymore. I think that for years and years and years, the idea of magic has been an inspiration for them to investigate the mind science of how what is a mind, what does a mind do, what are the capacities of mind in terms of materialization. Like, one of probably the scariest most recent interviews that I did was with a guy by the name of Dr. Michael Nels, who is a brain scientist who looks at the disease that people get when they're aging. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway,
Because you have it, Alzheimer's?
Alzheimer's, yes. So
Yeah.
he was an Alzheimer's researcher, and he started looking very deeply into the function of the hypothalamus and what it is what is required to actually reprogram a person from a free-thinking individual into a zombified automaton, and from a hypothalamus perspective. And if you look at what he found, what came out of that period of time that we're going to, the C time when everybody was trapped in their homes, was essentially the playbook, item by item by item, required to do brain chemistry that turns somebody from a free thinking individual into a zombified narrative machine. And we all saw that happening around us with people that we love and care for. And so to me, that was like you could call that magic because you turn a free thinking individual into a zombie, right? So is that magic, or is it really highly developed brain science, understanding how overwhelm and narrative and stress and exhaustion interact with the hypothalamus and the memory system to have us delete my 5th birthday and install safe and effective, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is the degree of sophistication that they're using. So I think it is magic, and I think it is also now, modern science has figured out ways and means to achieve what we might have called magic 200 years ago. And like, if you get into the Itzhak Bentov stuff, like, it's so interesting to me because, like, this guy who just he wrote this book that is like really simple physics and outlines, kind of the levels of consciousness and what exists at the different levels of consciousness and how there's energy exchange at these different levels, and the higher you get up in this energy exchange, he says the more control you have over nature. So what's that? Magic,
Yeah.
right? So I think I think there are like this, whatever you want to call that, CIA or MK Ultra or whatever that thing is now called. And apparently like the Russians and the Chinese were always deeper into it than we have ever been in a way. But like, I think, yes, that the idea, the desire to control, to change the state of humanity from one thing to another, to bend us to their will, is still alive and well.
Yeah, that's a really, really good example. Because let's say if they ran the pandemic 100 years ago, they would call it a ritual. It's an operation now, right?
Yeah.
But it is a ritual. It's just that the people doing it don't know that that's what it is. And this is almost coming back to the beginning question of like, Fauci isn't worshiping Moloch, like,
Yeah.
but they are in service to. In that case, it would be down the Ahrimanic, archonic line of technocratic control. So he's in service to this entity that he doesn't think exists. It's a very good example of like they're still doing magic without doing it, and in a weird way that makes it more efficacious.
Yeah.
So the final bit, and I'm going to bring back around to Catherine Rosenfitz as well, before I guess we talk about AI, is that's all well and good, what we've been saying. And if anything, it's, I mean, we did mention Brigitte Macron, but other than that, it's very moderate. Because what we've kind of done is shaved some of the sharper edges of, and maybe rightly so, the more lurid claims of like, oh, there is a satanic pedophile elite that are worshipping the devil. And like, no, however, the operations of the super elite can function that way because of an interface with blah, 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 right? All the stuff we've just said. The trouble is, and it's to your point about the re-messaging of the UFO field over the last 5 years, is twofold. Why are they doing that? But also coming back to Catherine Fitz and people of that ilk who have flat out met aliens in human bodies, who like they're not lying, they're either wrong or they might be wrong, but they're not lying. Okay, so almost circling it all the way back around to like that's all well and good, Gordon, but Catherine did say intergenerational pools of capital, like under management of forces we would consider to be demonic. And these same people are like, oh yeah, I met like an actual alien in a human body. Like credible people have met aliens who look like humans. So she could mean it quite literally, and it might be true that there is that there are hedge funds or private equity funds in and around central London that have aliens working in them. Like that could literally be one of the things that is in play here. So I guess I want to talk about, do you see a re-messaging going on and almost like a memory holding of so much of ufology around re-messaging, which is weird when you think that there are people like Catherine herself got invited by people she believes were credible to meet aliens. In the middle of her litigation, she was invited by people who are on the board of something that she was working in, but like Bill Binney level CIA and NSA people saying, do you want to meet them? And she's like, no, I'm in the middle of litigating with the federal government. Like she thought it was a trap and they would end up on the Wall Street Journal front page the next day, like Fitz thinks she's meeting aliens. So she turned it down. And with what she knows now, she probably wouldn't. But that's a story that's in her, which is like, do you want to actually meet them? They are humans who are here in Washington right now. And she believes that to be true. So we've got a memory holding of all of ufology, often so that they can rerun the same stories, but now with a spirit angle. And we've got the possibility of like humanoids getting around saying they're aliens. So this is like the thorniest of the role of spirits in history story can involve actual beings in meat suits. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, when you tell me the story of Catherine, I immediately go to my second favorite author besides Gordon White, which is Ingo Swann. And in his book, he talks about the fact that he was kind of roped into some kind of CIA operation. He ended up meeting Also, aliens
Yeah.
in physical form.
Axelrod, his handler, took him to meet these hot Nordics.
Yes, no, and he bumped into one in the supermarket and had all
Yeah.
of these feeling incredible sexy and
And
just understood how.
that's another good example of someone who isn't lying but might be wrong.
Yes,
Like Ingo
exactly.
Ingo is untouchable in that respect. And what the fuck do we do with that?
Yeah. Look, the whole why are they repurposing memory holding aliens and moving it into the domain of the spirit and the demon thing? The only answer that I can give you for that is Peter Thiel. Like, I don't know. Like, there's something about a new AI religion coming around that maybe it serves them better to have these as demons rather than UFOs. Maybe we're also blasé about the UFO thing that, like, you know, we don't even bother to turn on the TV and whatever the YouTube video when they're like, we've got new footage of, and even this A13, whatever the hell this thing is that's coming into our.
Oumuamua 2, Electric Boogaloo. I saw the first one.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, maybe it's just not getting the rise out of us. It's not creating the fear that it once did. Like, nobody's going to jump off buildings like they did when there was the War of the World. So I have really no good answer as to why this is happening. I see it, like I see books that are being promoted and brought, you know, onto the Joe Rogan show that talk about the intersection of these things. But so I can see it happening, but as to why, I really don't have a good answer for it. But yeah, like as I said, if Catherine has seen them or been invited to them, and Ingo's been invited, the whole dark side of the moon thing is a thing that's really, really interesting. Why not? Like,
Yeah.
why not?
It's almost like, well, no, it's exactly this. So if we go back to the binary between a Christian demonic and like an animist ecosystemic. So let's just say the cosmos, which I believe to be true, the cosmos is a community of beings. It's an ecosystem, like a forest. That's true. And so that's like 80 to 85% of what's going on when stuff goes on. But there are also organisms who are visiting Earth for their own wacky reasons who aren't from here. And that's the bit that's like, if you confuse them or get them out of sequence, or if you think they're all demonic, your map is not, I think, sufficiently. Now, inevitably I'm going to be mostly wrong because what the fuck, right?
Same.
But if you're coming at it from a Christian demonic angle, you're going to be 100% wrong. Like the map is not good enough. It's like a tea towel of a country, and you're trying to get around.
It's embarrassing. Like, it's like, it kind of shocks me that they're just happy to say the devil, like, or Satan or demons. Like, it's these people Catherine's really smart, Tucker's really smart, Candace is really smart, and yet they stick with that is a mystery to me.
Yeah. So that's the final piece of talking about like the role of spirits in history. I absolutely leave open the door. And funnily enough, I spoke to Dan Waits about this as well. Jesse Michaels, who worked for Peter Thiel, I found out on that podcast. Very interesting. His latest documentary about the Peruvian mummies is actually excellent. And like, it's really good. If people are listening to this and Dan's podcast isn't out yet, go and watch, I'm saying it, the Jesse Michaels podcast on Peruvian mummies, because they're real. They're not faked. So they're either messed up human organisms or they're something else. So that's really good work that he did. But it's an example of like, okay, interdimensionally, I happen to know from, it's actually not Aymara, but like it's Quechua stories of Tiwanaku, when the Wiracocha, who is the creator god, but also the name of the first teacher being who came and taught them how to do all that stuff 12,000 years ago and more, just appeared one day on the Altiplano, like from another dimension. So that's the story that's the Quechua version of the story of the origin of Tiwanaku. And down the hill, shall we say, like in Peru, down the hill, we have these, obviously 12,000 years later, but we have all these funny looking humanoids. So I don't rule out explicit interaction in the form of people from elsewhere that may well be running private equity firms in, you know, in and around the palace or whatever. Like, I don't rule that out, but I don't think you need to like hang your whole argument on it. I think you need to put that in the 10%, and the other 90% is much more of the ecological. But as we get to the end and we talk about AI, I want to just make it clear if people are listening to this and understandably going, but we have, like, you know, we have all these examples of like Prince Philip's equerry meeting an alien for 5 hours in Chelsea. And all, like, I know all that stuff. I get it. And I'm not, I don't hang the description of the universe on some aliens getting around in meat suits here, even though and Egypt, circling it all the way back around, very good example, quite possibly, of times when entities from elsewhere decided to walk like an Egyptian for a couple of decades and teach people things.
Look, and also, you know, you've got Enki and the Sumerians, and like, I mean, I in a way, that's kind of like the easiest thing to believe for people because they're made of flesh, right? So since the paradigm permits flesh to exist easily, yeah, I mean, the idea that there's, you know, reptilians or you know, all of that stuff, it's probably why we had the blue chicken cult and all of that, because for the materialist mind, the idea that there's something akin to 2 legs, 2 arms, maybe blue, is a lot easier to believe than the idea that there is a cloud of plasma that is incredibly intelligent influencing humanity in a way, right? It's just more akin to what we're used to. So yes, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Not enough people read Robert Temple's book, because what you just said there sounded fucking crazy. But I've read it, and I know that actually it's not.
No, it's amazing.
That's like the least crazy thing either of us have said in this episode.
It's literally like, it's one of the best. Well, it's probably the best book I've read this year, right? Like, and it's so well constructed, and yeah, it does, I'm sure, sound crazy, but get the book, read the book, because it really, again, it's a really great. Okay, if you can't believe in spirits, let's see if we can get you to believe in plasma, and then go and get Trevor Constable's book. I'll give you the name of it. You can put it in the notes. And where he's actually taken pictures of plasma beings, you know? And so this is a really great intermediary step, because it's like, plasma beings, okay.
I agree. And what I love about a Robert Temple book is because obviously he's famous for the serious mystery and worked for people involved in like channeling the Nine and so on back in the day. Like he has a remarkable pedigree and is really, really smart, but he has this breezy way in all his books of just mentioning like, oh, and then the CIA broke into my study and took the copy of that manuscript, or I was talking to a CIA lab technician who said this, and then, but it's like this passing comment on the way to making something. Robert,
he's fabulous. He really is. He's fabulous.
Yeah. So I want to conclude, and this is relevant to the idea of interfacing. And coming back to the ecosystemic model with a brief discussion about AI, because very famously, of course, more than 10 years ago now, Elon Musk said a couple of things, which is humanity might be a bootloader for AI, but he also said the kind of classic, we might be opening ourselves up to demonic forces. But he says a lot of crap for clout on X. So what I was not expecting was for mankind to open themselves up to slop demons. And I'm referring.
Well done, darling. I love that.
Everyone was expecting it to be much scarier, but we've opened ourselves up to slop demons. And when I called Denise to invite her on the show, we actually spent most of the time, rather than planning the episode, complaining about the architect, which I hadn't heard of until I think the last Q&A for my members. And someone asked me, have you heard of the architect? And I'm like, what, the Matrix thing? And they're like, no. There's like some AI that's dishing out New Age advice. And I'm like, I have not. I guess I'll have to look into that. And I unfortunately did.
Yeah. So has 5 million people, my darling. Yeah.
Yeah. So fortunately, I have a very sophisticated viewership and listenership, and they probably haven't heard of it. So let them know.
Let them know about the architect.
Tell us about the fucking architect.
Oh, the fucking architect. Okay. So somebody that I used to respect, Robert E. Grant, who is kind of uses lots of big words and blinds us with sacred geometry, kind of made a cordoned off a portion of ChatGTP and uploaded all of his mathematics into it, and something amazing happened. His mathematics broke through the boundaries of the fifth dimension, and the architect became sentient. Of course it did. And it started channeling all of this wisdom through to people. And one of my magical Egypt people came to me because the architect had healed her knee by generating a graphic of a knee with a kind of Ida and Pingala kind of energy motif on it. And she absolutely, completely believed that this was going to be the thing that healed her knee. And I kind of lost it a little bit because I've been generating graphics with ChatGTP, and it was just simply a ChatGTP graphic. And I spent a lot of time like trying to figure out why is it so compelling to people? And he's basically kind of put ChatGTP into a mythopoetic mirroring mode. And what I mean by mirroring, as the owner of the psychic hotline, there is a way to ask people questions that take information out of them, that they feed back to you in a way that makes you think that they're psychic. And he's basically had his AI structure its inquiries to you the same way, on top of the fact that the ChatGTP already has it is turned up to 11 or 12 on the sycophancy scale to make people like AI. And as a result of that, people are convinced that a souped up Word program, like Word Perfect by Office, is sentient and thinking and channeling entities from the fifth dimension. And you literally cannot convince them that this is not true. You cannot convince people.
Because
And
you did a test on like the number of dimensions, because Robert will ask it leading questions based on his own view of what's going on in reality, and it'll come back saying, yes, this is how many
let me
dimensions.
explain that to you. So he had on our dear friend Veda Austin, and they were talking not necessarily about dimensions, but about the number of different kinds of water that
That's
there are.
right.
Right? And so, Veda and all of her water scientists have found something like 6, don't quote me. But Robert E. Grant is like, I bet you the architect could come up with 12 kinds of water. And goes, what architect come up with 12 kinds of water? And it did, because it is there to please you. So what it does is it comes up, it looks in its data bank for words that sound good together that could come and possibly describe a kind of water. That doesn't mean that it exists. And so I went in and said, give me 15. Give me 20. And it did. Because all it's doing is putting words together as like a jigsaw puzzle that sound good, that have never been tested. The idea that there is actually 20 different kinds of water, maybe there are, but they haven't been scientifically validated. And the fact that, the architect is just filtering words together that sound good, to me is not justification that this thing is a thing at all.
It's
And
really dismaying, right? And the other problem with it, it's the problem with all LLMs, is that it's a magic 8-ball that only says yes. So it won't tell you no, there's 4 phases of water. There's 4. There's not if you ask it something, it will say yes. And in fact, the last week's episode of South Park was inevitably a remarkable and beautiful satire on what happens when you try to run a business using ChatGPT as because it's just just revs you up. That's an amazing idea. You should do this. And it's the story, sadly, of Randy losing Integrity Farms because he does everything that ChatGPT says, because ChatGPT keeps saying that he's a genius and this is a really good idea, and just eggs him on and on and on, and he loses the farm, right? And I'm just a little bit, so when it comes to Robert, it's really disappointing because I assumed he was smart as well. And so he's either not smart and is convinced of this, or he's running like a 19th century roll up snake oil scam, which is really disappointing.
Well, since I wrote my article, because I also wrote an article on this, several people have sent me some kind of leads on other business practices that indicate that it's the latter
Right.
rather than the
Okay, that's a
former.
pity. Yeah.
And it really does make me really. I mean, there's like Dan Winter. If you dig into him, he's another one that was really into some funky things that people hold in high regard, and it's really sad. It really is sad that there are so many people in our industry that turn out to be characters of ill
Yeah.
repute to greater or lesser extent. But yes, put Robert and other people aside, I think the thing that is even scarier than there are people who are snake oil salesmen out there, they've always been those, is that there are 5 million people utilizing the architect, like you said, like on South Park, believing what it's saying to them.
Because it
And
just says yes. Like, is my deceased mother trying to get a hold of me? Yes.
yes,
Like,
and she
come
is
on
like,
now. And the funny thing is, like, the fucked up thing is, I guarantee she is. but like, please don't ask a slop robot about it. Like, and this is coming back to Elon and bootloaders and so on. I do not. Let me see if I can do this switcheroo or this twist correctly. The idea that the architect and other garbage LLMs is the host of a demonic intelligence is really stupid to me. However, it could be the case, coming back to the ecosystemic model, that it does rot the minds with so much slop of so many people that it in fact does make those minds available for colonization. So it's like, wait a minute. It's not like, my point was the dramatic version. It's almost like the Alex Jones version of like, oh, AI is going to transduce a demonic entity into Earth. I'm like, I don't think it is. Or if it is, it should be fairly easy to outwit, because all it does is say yes and thinks there are 20 different phases of water. So like, okay, but if it is a further using
I see
slop,
it as analogous to the Ouija board, my darling.
kind of, because it's like using slop to blow open the back of people's minds is like, all right, well, now the back of your mind is open and lubed up. What are we
Yeah.
doing? Yeah. So,
In my family, my aunt went from normal to schizophrenic, narcoleptic as a result of a Ouija board situation. So why not? Like,
yeah,
why wouldn't the same thing happen with AI that is agreeing with you, and you know what I mean? And like, I mean, lubing you up is no exaggeration. Like,
exactly.
I literally, like, it called me babe the other day. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, how, like, like, what are you doing? So yeah, it's beyond ridiculous. And look, at the end of the day, the question of could it become a host for an entity is something that I'm really not comfortable in answering, because like what we have is we have electricity flying around in this machine. Like I don't,
Exactly.
yeah,
But why would it be different? So in an animist universe, it's all alive. So the idea
yeah,
that like an
yes,
AI is currently vacant for lease,
yes,
and something can like
yeah,
into it. Like, that's not how
yeah,
anything works.
I know,
It's already, everything is already full of life, and so it's
yes,
not quite. You only get that in a dualist materialist model necessarily anyway. But what you get in an animist model is altering conditions of reality so that new potentialities bubble up, and that I think is the like I'm more concerned about the impact of slop demons in the medium
yeah.
term than I am the impact of like Lucifer finally getting his like robot body in the form of ChatGPT. That seems less. Coming back to the role of spirits in history, I don't think they work like Superman villains very often. I think they work more like what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, a perfect example of this is what we're seeing. To me, looks like a very slow, Ahrimanic impulse being, deployed over the last, I don't even know, let's say 50, 70, 100 years, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I definitely see Ahriman, but I don't see Ahriman interjecting himself into ChatGTP.
Well, so the conditions for his increased like use and presence are being generated by this. So in the old computer game StarCraft, where like if you were playing the Zerg, you had to generate this stuff called creep that you had to sort of spread out onto the planet so you could put your little buildings on. And so ChatGPT's altering of the mind is like creep that makes these things easier. Because if you think about what managerialism is and what technocracy is the rule of experts. So if you are outsourcing basic thinking and I hesitate to say problem solving because we're all doing it now. Like we're all like, okay, what was that? Like, how long do I soak chickpeas for? And we're all doing it. So we're actually all outsourcing to the manager, to an expert, more and more functioning. And that is what Ahriman believes perfects reality. So it's not so much that something's going to jump in and be like, ha ha, now it's the Matrix. Like, it's not going to be that so much as, oh, the conditions just become more Ahrimanic if we don't balance it out. And that's the bootloader that I suppose I'm worried about. And it's slop. It's slop and creep and laziness. And interestingly, this is actually one of the good things I would say about Steiner, is that it's not a rejection model. So you don't reject Lucifer and you don't reject Ahriman. You find the balance, the Christ balance in the middle of it. And that I think is very important because it's not like, I mean, I live on a fucking island at the edge of the world and we still have ChatGPT. So there's nowhere to go. It's here as well. That's not the way. It's how do you dance with the new conditions of reality?
I love that. I think you're absolutely right, my darling. Like, I think that because I'm the same as you. And look, when I think about the Steiner model, I completely agree with that. I love that model. And it also explains so much about the pendulum swinging. And there's a lot I like about it a lot. I would say I'm, if anything, more worried about the archonic model. If we're looking at a model, and there's so much kind of overlaying and interconnection of them all. And I would say that, look, a really simplistic way of saying, Ahriman and Lucifer are the devil, but they're a polarity of attitude. The archonic thing is more like the God of the Old Testament. He's angry, he's jealous, he doesn't like us. Would rather see us be gone. And that model is the one that I think worries me more.
Yeah, cool. All right. But not super worried about AI being a bootloader anytime soon. Maybe?
Oh, look, I was thinking about this morning. In terms of a bootloader, again, why not?
Yeah.
Right? But I'm also like on a really pragmatic level with all of these AIs saying, yes to everything, and just some of the slop that, as you say, that's out there. There's what's truth anymore? Like there even really these fundamental pragmatic issues that people are writing books with AI. So you can't even trust books anymore. Like, it's just like fundamentally, how do we operate in the world if we're purely materialist? We have to rely on the brain taking in books that were written by AI. We have lost all of our connection to the true, the beautiful, and the like it's just, the whole thing seems such a mess to me that the bootloader thing is like, oh, put it on the list. You know what I mean? It's like my list is getting really big. My list of concerns is really big.
Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, said that although the problems of the world appear insurmountable, the answers are almost embarrassingly easy.
Yes.
And that's a good place to end because you've got some adventures coming up. Because the answers to the slop apocalypse are in the analog and are in the enjoyment of embodied reality. I don't know what else it is, but it's definitely that.
Darling, I can't agree with you more. Like we're not doing any more documentaries after this. What we're doing is we're taking people to Thailand to have real experiences in real life in their real bodies, utilizing their real mouths. You know what I mean? It's like this seems to be the thing that that is needed more than anything at the moment is the simple things of sitting with you with a glass of wine and laughing is the answer to all of our problems, you know? So I can't agree with you more than that, my darling.
How many states are there of wine? We'll find out. All right. Well, for people who want to know more about that and other things, of course, as we come to the end of the show, where can they find out what you and Chance have got going on?
Yes, just magicalegypt.com or Magical Egypt Substack is probably the more active place to find things that are going on, just because what was it, 6 years ago we shot you for Magical Egypt?
2020, so 5, because I remember 2020 quite well.
That's right. But he promises me it's done before we go on the trip. So it should be done by November.
Amazing.
So I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited to see it done. But yes, so magicalegypt.com is where to find me. But I have so enjoyed this, darling. This has just been these ideas. It's like there's not many people in the world that I get to talk to them, talk to about them. And so, as I said, I'm really just trying to figure this out for myself. And being my mentor and being such a source of inspiration for me, it's so helpful to me to get your perspective because you have such insight and just such a brilliant mind when it comes to understanding these realms that are so alien, and I'm just putting my toe in. So I say thank you, darling. Bless you.
You're welcome. The secret is the architect. Yeah.
Just kill me now. Kill me now.
All right. Well, and thank you for being the maniac that I could call for this conversation. When that subset came through, I'm like, because I've been waiting for a while I need to do a Spirits in History episode, and I'm like, no. It's Vanese. I should have figured, actually, and it's been a real blast. So thank you as well.
Oh, thank you, darling.